Good morning. I apologize for my voice automatically. It is really raggy today. I've been coughing and coughing. It's the season. So let's all change the season. I say we take it to fall or winter. And through a democratic process, you think we can change that? This morning's reading has changed from what I had originally thought I would do today. It comes out of Trayvon Martin's murder from the verdict last night. I want to spend just a few minutes speaking regarding last night's guilty verdict, or lack of a guilty verdict in the murder. Many across the world have waited for justice to happen for Trayvon and for Trayvon's family. And I've often seen the justice system fail in regards to the humanity of those murdered. Transgender people in particular have seen the system fail consistently with hung juries or juries simply letting the murderers go based on bias against the transgender individual. We found that in my community it's almost impossible in the current system to gain guilty verdicts anywhere in the United States. People of color are consistently oppressed in the justice system. The system is designed and heavily slanted towards guilty pleas, racial profiling, heavy incarceration times and penalties towards minorities. At the same time, Trayvon's murder keeps our UU principles focused and our vision clear. The work is not done, the oppression continues, and we are the ones to stand on the side of love and proclaim the oppression that it must end. In many cases, we are the only voices that make those proclamations. With our voices, with our Unitarian Universalists as champions of seeking to bring truth and justice where others are unable to be heard, I hope that we'll find peace and a way to seek change in the face of such injustice. I was speaking with Reverend Meg Riley last night about it, and Meg immediately, within minutes, I don't know how people do this, wrote a poem, and I'm going to read that for our reading, but I felt we needed to have some preface. Spirit of love and justice, tonight I'm angry. May my anger burn cleanly, joining the light of so many hearts on fire. May we know the anger is a source of strength, anger that seeks to purify, anger that has as its fuel the power of truth, anger grounded in love. May I live my life so that Trayvon Martin did not die in vain. May my anger give me strength to take action, to stand my own ground, the grounds of compassion, the ground of justice which dwells beyond courts of law and its technicalities, the ground of worth and dignity of every human being. May we live our lives so that Trayvon Martin did not die in vain, so that African American youth are not seen as threatening merely because they exist. May we take steps to bring such a world into vision, concrete steps, particular steps in our own communities. Anger used well is energy for life. Anger turned inwards saps the strength. Anger turned to rage severs real connection. May I use this holy anger well, use my privilege well, use my voice and my strength and my power. May we draw on the strength of those who have turned anger to love throughout the generations, those who have made a way out of no way, those who have burned but not been consumed by this holy fire. May we remember the strength of our connections to the generations, the ancestors and those yet to be born, the strength of our connection to the fighters and to the lovers. May I live my life so that Trayvon Martin did not die in vain. May we live our lives so that Trayvon Martin did not die in vain. May he live forever in our deeds, in our commitment to justice, which can never be found in any court of law. May it be so. Like I said, awesome. Okay, let me shuffle here. There we go. So this morning's sermon is about rainbows and the spectrum of the rainbow. But first I thought I'd tell you a story. How many of you like stories? Oh, okay, good. So a young couple moves into a new neighborhood. The next morning while they're eating breakfast, the young woman sees her neighbor hanging the wash outside. That laundry's not very clean. She doesn't know how to wash correctly. Perhaps she needs better laundry soap. Her husband looks on, remaining silent. Every time her neighbor hangs her wash to dry, the young woman makes the same comment. A month later, the woman, surprised to see a nice clean wash on the line, says to the husband, "Look, she's finally learned how to wash correctly. I wonder who taught her this." The husband replies, "I got up early this morning and cleaned our windows." And so it is with life. What we see when watching others depends on the clarity of the windows through which we look. Isn't it amazing to me how just a thin film on a window can distort a person's view of everything? Much of our lives are formed by attitudes and views that are derived from really inaccurate visual information. Our windows are dirty, our minds override our common sense. It's almost like quitting Apple and moving to Windows. Almost. It's a whole new learning curve, and honestly, socializations, in my experience, have been pretty tough to figure out and override. So let me spend a few minutes talking about sexual orientation spectrums and gender identity spectrums. I often have this conversation concerning the spectrum of life and windows and laundry, surprisingly, and I don't like doing laundry. For example, at one point in my life, I had an intimate relationship with a dear man who was gay. However, in my relationship, it was established that my gender identity was female, even though I was male-bodied. So was it a gay relationship based on body parts or anatomy? Or was it a heterosexual relationship based on my gender identification? Now, without throwing all the legal nonsense into the mix, because we know how that goes, I think the more important question in my mind was, did we treat each other well? Did we love each other? And did we truly care about each other? I think that was the question that was more important to me. But we all have these labels, and however you want to put a label on it, I had a relationship with a wonderful guy. How do you fix that with a label? The spectrum is enormous when it comes to gender identity. The spectrum is enormous when it comes to sexual orientation. And it's enormous when it comes to humanity as a whole, of who we are. I know many transgender individuals who are in relationships, and they may be preoperative, post-operative. Their gender identity dictates their sexual orientation. Or does their anatomical presentation dictate their orientation sexually? It's a misnomer as far as I can tell that who you love somehow has to have a label put on it in a spectrum to be able to define love. As a bisexual individual, that's me. I'm a bisexual woman. Many people question if it's even possibly to be attracted to the diversity of anatomical genders that exist, which kind of brings up another kind of side note here. In the medical community, we usually get little boxes that say male and female, right? In reality, there are 132 different chromosomal genders that exist. 132 folks. And we take all that and we distill it down and say, okay, based on what this looks like, we have male and female. That's all we're going to look at. That leaves a whole spectrum of 130 potential classifications out for labels. So how do we really base gender and gender identity? How do we work with that? Do we label it? I think when we're dealing with windows and our understanding, I think in the past 5 years, I've seen the largest movement towards understanding gender identity that I've ever seen in my life. Living through it has been real hell on earth. Okay? But it's really miraculous to see 6-year-olds coming out, parents being supportive of them, Time magazine running full-page spreads, and all the national media picking it up in a positive light. I'm not saying this is a freak show and this kind of thing. It's very encouraging. And your congregation in particular has been a partner in making that happen. I know a lot of the work that has been done here through conversations and coming over, and you guys do a lot of work in this area, and I appreciate it, and I know others do. Some of the rainbow spectrum is difficult to see. You know, we all know the rainbows, we know the basic color bands, but some of it's a little difficult to see and perceive. For example, a person who may have color blindness may say the blue spectrum in the rainbow doesn't really exist. They can't see it, so therefore it doesn't exist, right? So all of a sudden it's gone. So without necessarily the correct vision on the rainbow spectrum, you may not be able to see all the beauty and all the colors and all the hues. And if we compare that to who we are as people, then I think we need to learn how to sharpen our vision, how to appreciate those hues more, how to clean our windows off. I see the problem as being, we've been socialized to have specific views through our windows. Some of you may know my roommate, Debbie. Debbie's really fun. She's really sorry she couldn't be here today. But Debbie has been a UU for much, much longer than I am. And she had a sermon in a congregation concerning socialization of windows and views. And she stood up and she said, I am racist. I am transphobic. I am heterophobic. I am ageist. For someone who's been in a UU since the early 70s, that astounded me that she would turn around and say something like that. But it is so true, folks. It's so, so true. We're socialized into racism. We're socialized into misogyny. I can't even talk today. We're socialized into the phobias, ageist, and the list goes on and on and on. And societal rules and boundaries and methodologies produce in us reactions that are consistently reinforcing those stereotypes and those biases and prejudices. Differently, well, again, we carry a lifetime of these biases. My previous ex-wife was blind. She was very bright, but she was completely blind, and we had a guide dog. We had several guide dogs. We had Meg and Taj and Candy, and they're lovely animals. But what was really interesting was more of how people interacted with us as a whole, based on their distortions. What was really interesting is some people would come up and they would talk to the dog and ask questions so that Sue could answer to the dog. Or they would speak really loudly. And then we became hearing impaired. Or we went into Walmart, and in a full harness that said guide dog on it, the greeter would say, "Ma'am, is that a guide dog?" Or we would have other humorous things happen along the way. We were declined to eat in restaurants. We were told to leave potential buildings because we had the guide dog with us. We'd actually been, my ex was actually in the Philadelphia Inquirer when a pizza restaurant owner refused to serve her because the dog was there. And you would think, You would think by now we would have a handle on some of the things that people need and the tools. But it's really not true. The filters are still in place, the biases are still in place. I was down in New Orleans last month, speaking at another Unitarian Universalist congregation, and I had the gift really to speak at the State House. And before I had gotten up to speak, they were saying, well, what's your sexual orientation? And I like to be a little flip sometimes. And I said, well, it's queerish. And a gay man came up and said, there is no such thing as queerish. And I said, well, in reality, I'm a bisexual. And he goes, well, honey, you'll choose someday what you really want to be. That was astounding to me, in the fact that we were sitting with about 400 people in a pride march stating we are GLBT. And everybody's chanting GLBT, but let's take this B and let's throw it over there, because that's not really real. Again, our filters and our windows and our perceptions and all these things really interfere with our being able to see and to view the true rainbow spectrum, the true world as it exists. Let me bring up another lens, another area that we have perception issues with. Again, socialized. What's our lens and vision look like when it comes to prisoners? Those incarcerated in our jails and prisons. Quite a while back, probably close to 20 years now, I did a lot of prison ministry. And I visited quite a few that were incarcerated and provided support to the families that were devastated. They were shunned in their communities through no fault of the wife or the husband. They were heavily shunned. I have to say, some of the most rewarding work I've had in my entire lifetime is working with incarcerated inmates and their families. The tragedies, the stories of real people caught in dilemmas that they didn't know how to deal with. That doesn't excuse the crimes. It doesn't excuse their behaviors. But it speaks to their humanity. It speaks to who they are as individuals. For me, the evil prisoner lens was removed, and I was able to touch these individuals in ways that many others couldn't. But the tragedy of our system is that we demonize individuals who have been caught in the justice system, even though a good majority today in the justice system do not belong there. Even though they're there for, unequal crimes that are beyond my comprehension today. George Zimmerman walking free blew me away last night, while the young woman who warned a man to get away from her is now going to serve 20 years incarcerated in a Florida prison, which are some of the worst in our country. The injustice of it makes me very, very ill. Today, the lens of society paints you that if you are arrested, you are guilty. That is typically the justice system. That is our lens. That's the dirt that has now the film that's been put over our perceptions. When I grew up, I never thought about that. I never thought about, well, you got arrested, therefore you're guilty. It was always, you're not guilty until that jury tells you that you're guilty, that it's been proven. We don't have that anymore. And I really think it's a serious loss for our community and our country. I found in my life that, for me, the only way I can alter these lenses is to really go embrace that which I fear or that I'm uncomfortable with. I can intellectually masturbate to no ending degree in life. I don't know if any of you have that kind of happening in your life where you can overthink things. Are there any of you? Ah. I've noticed you congregations kind of have that flavor occasionally. Society paints some very distorted pictures, and as you use, I think our job to grow spiritually is to get through those lenses, through those filters, to put down on a daily basis as much as we can the different biases that we have so that we can see the true colors in the rainbow. Not just of gay, lesbian, bi, intersex, queer individuals, not gender conforming, gender non-conforming, gender identity, sexual orientation. I think our filters are much broader than that. I think we need to look at those who are differently enabled. A person in a wheelchair is a person, they're not the chair. A person with a guide dog is not the dog. I think we need to refine our lenses, but to do that, my experience is we have to immerse ourselves in it. We have to go to the prisons. We have to go to the schools for the blind. We have to go to different locations where we can not become, hey, I'm here to help you, but hey, I'm here really to learn. I want to understand about your life. I want to see you more human every day. I've always loved the first principle. Probably the first thing that brought me to Unitarian Universalism was the first principle. I had never been anywhere in all my travels and someone said, you know, we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Now that's a large thing to do. That encompasses more than most of us will ever be comfortable with. But to actually see the person for who they are. Debbie's right, I'm transphobic. There are members in my own community that I look at and say, what are you doing? That's not unusual. I've been socialized to think that way. But I have to take a step back and say, who is this person? Who is it? Is the laundry clean or is the laundry dirty? It's my window that's dirty, not theirs. I was telling the story a couple weeks ago about my son's amazement when he was younger of finding a copper penny in the ground. He had played in the yard, he had been digging around in the dirt, and this is kind of an amazing thing for my son. He's also visually impaired. Dirt was never his thing. He would wash his hands 50 times if he got dirty, so him playing in the dirt was like this real spectacular thing. And he found this old penny that had been in the dirt for quite a while, and it was like totally overgrown with stuff and discolored, very hard to read. And he wanted to see what was on the penny. So I took the penny over to the sink and we rinsed it off, and it still wasn't really legible. It was still pretty coarse. You know how they get dark and you can't really see any of the letters or anything. So being a student of rocket science that I have been in my lifetime, I went to the refrigerator and got some taco sauce. And I put the penny in the taco sauce where the acid cleaned up the penny. And he was astounded that this brown lump of metal had turned so bright. He was all excited. And he was able to take it to his magnifier and read the inscriptions and the dates and could see the face, and he was just like really excited. Maybe we all need more taco sauce in our lives. More salsa, more something. A little acid to take off that edge and that dirt. I think the spectrum for me has continually reminded me that I need to clean my own windows. That if I'm feeling uncomfortable, if I'm not really happy about a situation, if I'm starting to get real negative towards an individual, I think the first thing I need to check is my windows. And then I think the second thing is to try to see the inherent worth and dignity of the person. That usually puts some pretty good brakes on me. Not always. I'm a little feisty, so not always. I think it can remind us that often our teachings, the system of government that creates barriers to reality and truth, I think without a diligent cleaning consistently, it leads to oppression, it leads to fear, it leads to injustice, it leads to misunderstandings, hatreds, and ultimately, as Trayvon found, it ended up in his death. That a window of a person who was so biased killed him. So I have a challenge for you this week, because I know you're all up for challenges. You're UUs. All we do is fight the challenge, right? As you go through the week, I'd like you to pick one or two lenses in your life where you're uncomfortable. Or maybe you're just not real happy, or you get angry every time a situation comes up, or you have a lot of fear about it. And I'd like to recommend that you consider clearing it off a little bit. Maybe it's you're afraid of the homeless. Maybe you want to go down to a soup kitchen or go down to a place where you can just pass out some food or sit down and talk to somebody who's lonely. Or maybe over to the Veterans Hospital. Maybe you're afraid of individuals with differently enabled bodies or victims of the war. I want to challenge you with your coworkers, maybe with somebody you know who's struggling. Go sit down. See if you can see the inherent worth and dignity of them. See if you can work through your own lenses. And then maybe the laundry won't be so dirty. May it be so.